Some mornings, the battle is already over before your feet even touch the floor. Not because life defeated you, but because your mind quietly whispered, you can start tomorrow. And tomorrow has become the safest prison ever built. No bars, no chains, just endless permission to wait. You tell yourself you're preparing, thinking, planning, learning. But deep inside, another voice, one you've tried to silence for years, keeps asking a painful question. If you know what you should do, why aren't you doing it? That question isn't meant to shame you. It's meant to wake you. Because the greatest tragedy isn't failing. It isn't making mistakes. It isn't even losing everything you've worked for. The greatest tragedy is carrying extraordinary potential through an ordinary life simply because you never learned to move before you felt ready. Most people spend their lives negotiating with fear, hoping confidence will arrive before action. But confidence has never worked that way. It has always been the reward for movement, never the requirement. I've met people who possessed remarkable intelligence, extraordinary talent, and dreams large enough to change generations. Yet years later, they were standing in exactly the same place. Not because they lacked opportunity, not because the world conspired against them, but because every single day they waited for the perfect feeling. They believed motivation was something that visited lucky people. They believed discipline belonged to the gifted. They believed courage was reserved for those who never doubted themselves. None of that is true. The people who build extraordinary lives are not strangers to fear. They simply become strangers to excuses. Listen carefully. There is a dangerous lie that quietly follows ambitious people. It doesn't sound destructive. In fact, it sounds intelligent. It says, I'll begin when everything is clear. But clarity is often born in motion, not in stillness. The map reveals itself only after you take the first step. Waiting for certainty before you move is like waiting to become strong before lifting the weight. It is backwards. Yet millions live this way every day. And perhaps you've lived this way longer than you wanted to admit. Maybe you've spent months watching videos, reading books, making plans, collecting ideas. Every new piece of information gives you another temporary feeling of progress. But knowledge without execution becomes emotional entertainment. It feels productive while quietly stealing your future. There comes a moment when learning stops serving you and starts protecting you from the discomfort of action. That is one of the most dangerous moments in life. Because comfort has a voice that sounds remarkably reasonable. It tells you to wait until Monday. It tells you to wait until next month. It tells you to wait until you have more money, more confidence, more experience, more support. Then years disappear. You don't notice it at first. The days still arrive. The sun still rises. Friends still celebrate birthdays. Seasons continue changing. But something inside you slowly becomes quieter. Not because your dream died, but because your brain died, Brett, because every promise you broke to yourself weakened your trust in your own word. That is the hidden cost of procrastination. People think procrastination steals time. It steals identity. Every time you say you'll do something and don't, a silent message reaches your subconscious. I cannot trust myself. Repeat that message enough times, and your self-confidence doesn't disappear overnight. It erodes grain by grain until even small decisions begin to feel heavy. Then people mistakenly believe they have a confidence problem, when in reality, they have a consistency problem. Your future is listening to every promise you make today. Think about that. The person you hope to become is quietly watching the decisions you're making this afternoon, not tomorrow, not next year, today. Every action casts a vote for the identity you're creating. Every excuse casts another vote for the life you're trying to escape. You don't become successful the day your bank account changes. You become successful the day your habits change. Money simply catches up later. Results simply introduce the person you've already become. This is why so many people become frustrated. They judge themselves by outcomes while ignoring the behaviors producing those outcomes. They water weeds and wonder why flowers refuse to bloom. They focus on the destination while neglecting the footsteps leading there. Life doesn't reward intentions. Life responds to patterns. And patterns are created by daily decisions so small they almost seem insignificant. One conversation, one workout, one page, one phone call, one uncomfortable decision you almost avoided. These moments appear ordinary while they're happening, yet they quietly become extraordinary when repeated long enough. Success rarely announces its arrival with fireworks. More often, it enters your life disguised as ordinary discipline repeated with extraordinary consistency. But discipline has been misunderstood. Many imagine discipline as punishment. They picture endless struggle, exhausting sacrifice, joyless routines. That isn't discipline. Discipline is self-respect in action. It is the ability to look at your future self with enough love that you're willing to disappoint your current emotions. Your feelings may beg for comfort. Your dreams beg for commitment. Every single morning, those two voices begin negotiating before your day even starts. One voice says, stay comfortable. The other whispers, become who you promised yourself you would become. The frightening truth is that whichever voice you feed today will return stronger tomorrow. That is why your first decision each morning matters more than you realize, because momentum is emotional. If your first victory is pressing the snooze button, your mind begins practicing surrender before breakfast. But if your first victory is getting up despite resistance, you've already reminded yourself that your decisions, not your emotions, are in control. Small victories create powerful identities. People often ask me, Jim, how do I stay motivated every day? I tell them they're asking the wrong question. Motivation is like the weather. Some days it's bright, some days it's cloudy. If your life depends on motivation, your future depends on conditions you cannot control. The better question is this: how do I become the kind of person who acts, whether I feel inspired or not? That question changes everything. Because winners are not people who always feel ready. They are people who have stopped making readiness a requirement. Some of your greatest opportunities will arrive on days when you feel tired. Some of your biggest breakthroughs will happen while you're doubting yourself. Some of your most important decisions will come disguised as inconvenient moments. If you wait to feel powerful before acting, you'll spend your life waiting. But if you choose to act despite uncertainty, something remarkable begins happening inside you. Your fear doesn't always disappear. You simply stop asking its permission. And that changes your relationship with yourself forever. Here's something most people never notice. Your brain is constantly collecting evidence about who you are. It doesn't listen to your affirmations nearly as much as it watches your behavior. You can stand in front of a mirror every morning repeating, I'm confident, I'm disciplined, I'm unstoppable. But if your actions tell a different story, your subconscious believes your actions every single time. Behavior is belief made visible. Every completed task whispers, I finish what I start. Every avoided responsibility whispers, maybe I'm not capable. Your identity is never built by what you say once. It is built by what you repeatedly prove. That is why action has such incredible power. Not because every action changes your circumstances immediately, but because every action changes the person taking it. And once the person changes, the future has no choice but to change with them. The life you've been dreaming about isn't waiting for a perfect version of you to appear. It is waiting for today's version of you to take the next step anyway. Because every remarkable journey begins with someone who finally grows tired of negotiating with hesitation and quietly decides that today, not someday, is the day they move. The moment you decide to move, something unexpected happens. The world does not suddenly become easier. The road does not unfold without obstacles. In fact, resistance often grows stronger. Doubt becomes louder. Old habits begin fighting for survival because they sense that the version of you they controlled for years is slipping away. That is why so many people mistake resistance as a sign they are on the wrong path. But what if resistance is actually proof that you're finally walking in the right direction? You see, comfort never argues with someone who has already surrendered. It only argues with the person who is trying to escape it. There is an invisible force inside every human being. It has no face, no voice you can point to, yet it quietly influences every decision you make. I call it the old identity. It is the collection of yesterday's habits, yesterday's fears, yesterday's disappointments, and yesterday's excuses. It wants today to look exactly like yesterday because familiarity feels safer than possibility. Every time you attempt something new, that old identity whispers, this isn't who we are. Don't believe it. The person you were yesterday has no authority over the person you choose to become today. Your past may explain your thinking, but it does not own your future. Many people spend years carrying invisible chains. Not chains made of iron, but chains made of memories. A failed business. A broken relationship. A dream that collapsed. A promise someone broke. They begin treating those experiences like permanent definitions instead of temporary chapters. They stop introducing themselves by their potential and start introducing themselves by their pain. That's one of the cruelest tricks life can play, convincing you that what happened to you is more important than what is still possible for you. Listen to me carefully. You are not your last failure. You are not the failure. You are not the opportunity you missed. You are not the criticism someone spoke of your life years ago. Those moments happened, but they do not get the final vote. Every sunrise is life quietly offering you another election, another chance to decide who you're going to become. And here's something fascinating about the human mind. It loves evidence. If you've spent years proving to yourself that you quit when things become uncomfortable, your brain expects quitting. It isn't trying to sabotage you. It's simply predicting tomorrow based on yesterday. That means if you want a different future, you must begin giving your mind new evidence. Not speeches, not wishes, evidence. Wake up when you promised you would. Finish what you started. Keep your word when nobody is watching. Make one difficult phone call. Read one more page. Take one more step after your emotions tell you to stop. These tiny victories may seem invisible to the world, but they are unforgettable to your subconscious. Every one of them quietly rewrites the story you've been telling yourself for years. And stories shape identities far more than circumstances ever could. Most people think they need a breakthrough. What they actually need is a pattern. Because breakthroughs are dramatic. Patterns are transformational. Imagine two people standing at the base of the same mountain. One waits for perfect weather before climbing. The other begins, even though the sky is uncertain. Months later, people call the second person lucky. They admire the view from the top without ever noticing the thousands of quiet steps that made it possible. Success has always been misunderstood by spectators. They celebrate the visible reward while ignoring the invisible repetitions. That's why comparison is so dangerous. You compare your beginning to someone else's 10th year. You compare your uncertainty to someone else's confidence. You compare your private struggle to someone else's public victory. And in doing so, you forget that every master was once unknown. Every champion once felt awkward. Every confident speaker once trembled before saying their first sentence. Nobody begins extraordinary. Extraordinary is built one ordinary day at a time. There will be mornings when your body feels heavy. There will be afternoons when your progress seems invisible. There will be evenings when you question whether any of it matters. Those moments are not interruptions to the journey. They are the journey. Because character isn't built when life applauds you. Character is built when nobody notices your effort except you. And that is where real confidence is born, not from applause, but from private victories. One of the greatest misunderstandings about success is believing that massive change requires massive action. It doesn't. Massive change requires massive consistency. A river doesn't carve through rock because it's the strongest force in nature. It carves through rock because it never stops flowing. Persistence accomplishes what intensity alone never can. Think about the oak tree. People admire its strength during the storm. Few admire the decades it spent growing roots before anyone paid attention. Your habits are those roots. Every disciplined decision pushes them a little deeper. And when life's storms inevitably arrive, and the wheel won't remain standing because you got lucky, you'll remain standing because you prepared long before anyone noticed. Now let me ask you something that may make you uncomfortable. How many dreams have you buried simply because you became impatient? How many opportunities have you abandoned because success failed to arrive on your schedule? The world teaches us to expect instant results, instant replies, instant entertainment, instant gratification. But life still operates by ancient principles. Seeds still require seasons. Muscles still require repetition. Wisdom still requires experience. And greatness still requires experience. And greatness still requires patience. You cannot rush the harvest while neglecting the planting. Some of you are standing one decision away from changing the direction of your entire life. Yet you underestimate that decision because it seems too small. You believe transformation must feel dramatic, but most transformations happen quietly. A person decides to wake up 30 minutes earlier. Someone chooses to stop making excuses. Another decides to read instead of scrolling. None of these decisions make headlines. Yet years later, they produce lives that seem almost unrecognizable. Never underestimate the quiet power of a repeated choice. There is another enemy you must recognize. It isn't failure. It isn't fear. It is emotional negotiation. Every day your mind will offer bargains. Skip today. You deserve a break. You've already worked hard enough. It won't matter if you miss just this once. Be careful. Success is rarely stolen all at once. It is borrowed in tiny pieces until one day you realize you've traded your future for temporary comfort. The strongest people are not those who never hear these voices. They simply refuse to let those voices become commands. Your emotions are wonderful servants. They are terrible leaders. If you allow your feelings to determine your commitments, your life will become unpredictable. But when your commitments begin guiding your feelings, something extraordinary happens. Action creates momentum. Momentum creates belief. Belief creates resilience. And resilience becomes the quiet force that carries you through seasons when inspiration disappears. That is why every single day matters. Not because every day changes your life, but because every day changes you. And when you change long enough, your life eventually has no choice but to follow. You don't need to conquer the next 10 years today. You only need to conquer today. Protect this hour. Honor this promise. Finish this task. Take this step. Then tomorrow, do it again. One day, people will ask how your life changed so dramatically. They'll search for a secret. They'll expect you to reveal one magical moment. But you'll smile because you'll know the truth. It was never one moment. It was thousands of moments when nobody was watching. Thousands of mornings when you acted despite uncertainty. Thousands of evenings when you chose growth instead of comfort. Thousands of ordinary decisions that quietly built an extraordinary life. And by the time the world notices your success, you'll understand something most people never do. Greatness was never created on the stage. It was created in the silent hours, when quitting would have been easy, but you chose once again to take action. There comes a moment in every person's life that no one else can see. No applause, no audience, no celebration. Just a quiet conversation between who you are and who you could become. It usually happens in ordinary moments. A morning when the alarm rings and every part of you wants to stay in bed. An evening when you're exhausted and your goals seem impossibly far away. A day when no one would blame you for taking the easy road. That is the moment that defines a life, not because the decision is dramatic, but because it reveals the person making it. The world celebrates grand achievements, yet destiny is often decided in invisible choices. When nobody is watching, your character is. When nobody believes in you, your habits still do. And every time you choose action over excuses, you send a quiet message to your soul. I am becoming someone I can depend on. That message is more valuable than praise, because praise can disappear. Success can disappear. Money can disappear. But a person who has learned to trust himself has discovered a form of wealth that no recession, no criticism, and no disappointment can ever take away. Never forget this. The greatest relationship you will ever have is not with your career. It is not with your possessions. It is not even with your dreams. It is with yourself. Every promise you keep strengthens that relationship. Every excuse weakens it. Imagine spending years with someone who constantly says they'll show up but never does. Eventually, trust would disappear. Yet many people unknowingly do exactly that to themselves. They promise they'll begin tomorrow. They promise they'll change next month. They promise they'll finally become disciplined next year. Tomorrow becomes another tomorrow, and another, until one day they wake up wondering where the years went. Time is patient, but it never waits. Every sunrise quietly asks the same question. What will you do with me today? It doesn't ask how talented you are. It doesn't ask how educated you are. It doesn't ask how fortunate your circumstances have been. It simply asks whether you will use the gift you've been given, because every day is a blank page, and every action writes another sentence in the story of your life. Here's something I've learned after watching people for decades. Most regret is not born from failure. It's born from hesitation. People rarely say, I wish I had tried less. They whisper something far more painful. I wonder what would have happened if I had started. Those words carry a lifetime of unanswered questions, a lifetime of imagined possibilities. Don't allow your future to become a museum of opportunities you never explored. Don't spend your later years introducing yourself to the person you almost became. Meet that person now. Become that person now. Not because the journey will be easy, but because the alternative is far more difficult. The pain of discipline is temporary. The pain of regret has remarkable patience. It waits, sometimes for decades, One of the most liberating truths you'll ever discover is that you don't need to control your entire future. You only need to control your next decision. Life becomes overwhelming when you attempt to carry 10 years at once. But today is manageable. One conversation, one workout, one chapter, one difficult decision, one courageous beginning. That is how extraordinary lives are built, brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. People often imagine that successful individuals possess some hidden advantage, a secret formula, a special gift. But spend enough time around remarkable people, and you'll notice something surprising. They still feel fear. They still experience doubt. They still face disappointment. The difference is beautifully simple. They have stopped treating emotions as instructions. Fear may knock on their door. They simply refuse to hand it the keys. That is emotional maturity, not the absence of fear, but the refusal to surrender your future to it. Remember, action is contagious. The moment you begin honoring your commitments, something changes beyond your own life. Your family notices, your children notice, your friends notice. The people around you begin seeing a different standard. Whether they say it or not, your consistency gives others permission to believe that change is possible. You never know who is silently borrowing courage from your example. That's why your actions matter more than you realize. You're not only building your future, you're shaping someone else's belief about what's possible. Think about the strongest oak in the forest. People admire its height, its strength, its ability to withstand storms. But none of that happened overnight. For years, its roots grew in darkness where nobody applauded. The roots came before the branches. The discipline came before the success. The unseen came before the unforgettable. Your life works the same way. Never despise seasons when nobody notices your progress. Those are often the seasons that matter most, because roots are always invisible before they become undeniable. And then, one morning, something extraordinary happens. Not because lightning strikes, not because luck suddenly arrives, but because you become someone different. The work that once felt impossible now feels natural. The habits that once demanded effort become part of your identity. The excuses that once controlled you lose their voice. You don't wake up transformed in a single day. You wake up one day realizing that transformation has quietly been happening all along. That's the miracle of daily action. It changes you so gradually that you hardly notice. Until one day, everyone else does. The world will call it success. You'll call it keeping promises. Never underestimate what one disciplined year can do. Never underestimate what 365 ordinary days of courageous action can build. A new career, a healthier body, a stronger mind, a peaceful heart, a meaningful legacy. Everything begins the same way, with one decision repeated long enough that it becomes part of who you are. So today, don't ask whether you feel motivated. Ask yourself a better question. What kind of person am I becoming through the choices I make today? Because that answer determines everything. If today's choice is difficult, make it anyway. If today's step is small, take it anyway. If today's progress feels invisible, trust it anyway. The future has always belonged to people who moved before they felt ready, to those who honored commitment above comfort, to those who understood that action is the language through which dreams become reality. Years from now, you'll either remember this season as the time you finally began, or the time you convinced yourself to wait a little longer. That decision has never belonged to fate. It has always belonged to you. So stand up, breathe deeply, silence the voice that has been negotiating with your potential for far too long. You don't need another perfect plan. You don't need another ideal moment. You don't need another reason. You already have one, your life. And every moment you delay is a moment that can never be returned. Walk forward with faith, not because the road is certain, but because your commitment is. Act with courage, not because fear has disappeared, but because your purpose has become greater than your hesitation. Build with patience, because everything lasting is built one day at a time. And remember this, whenever doubt tries to convince you to stop, the person you dream of becoming is not waiting somewhere in the future. That person is created every single day by what you choose to do next. Thank you for spending these moments with me. If this message spoke to something deep inside you, then don't let it remain just another inspiring video. Let it become the beginning of a promise you finally keep. Subscribe to this channel and join a community of people committed to growing stronger, wiser, and more intentional every single day. And if you're ready for another journey that will challenge the way you think and transform the way you live, stay with us for the next conversation. Until then, remember, success is never an accident. It is a daily decision. Now go and make today's decision count.